Hi, my name is Christina Clift. I am an Asian American young lady in her late 50s. I have black hair with gray streaks and I am wearing glasses. And next to me is
Sandy Klink. I'm the director at the moment, and I am a old woman with graying blonde hair and a print dress on today with specs also.
today we want to welcome to your journey through the independent living philosophy. It's a vision that has promoted lives and continues to inspire people with disabilities. Today, we'll delve into its origins, key influences, and historical milestones. One of the first things you want to know about the independent living movement is who founded it, and that's Ed Roberts, who's often referred to as the father of the independent living movement. He experienced polio as a child during a critical history in the US, and Sandy has some great stories she wants to share about him.
Okay. Ed and his mother had persevered through a lot of trials getting him through high school with his iron lung. Because as some of you may know, in the 60s and late 50s, when polio was still an issue in the United States, many people that were afflicted with polio um, couldn't breathe anymore, not on their own. And they had to use, instead of a fancy little ventilator that you carry on your chair these days, they had to live literally in this big tube thing, and it's a huge machine that was called an iron lung, and it physically pushed air in and out of Ed's lungs. Well, as time went on, he was able to be away from his iron lung a few hours at a time, thanks to his portable oxygen system that he carried with him. And he decided after he graduated from high school that he wanted to go on to college. So he went to his local vocational rehabilitation services provider and said, I want to go to Berkeley. That's where it's happening. And I want to join the crowd. And they laughed at him and said, you will never be able to go to college, much less get a degree and find any way to make employment work for you. Well, Ed was a pretty determined young man, and he knew a little bit about self advocacy. So he went to Berkeley and he started talking to them. Okay, I want to come to Berkeley in the fall. I've got the grades for it. Um, how are we going to make this happen? Once again, the dean laughed at him and said, well, our rules say that all new entering freshmen have to live on campus, and none of our dorms are accessible. So, sorry, kid, go home. Live in the back room where you belong. Now, he might not have said those last few words, but you can be darn sure he was thinking them. But Ed said, if by the end of the week I can find a place on campus to live, will you let me start classes? Dan looked at him funny and went, I get knowing. Nah, never gonna happen, right? Never gonna happen. Well, Ed came back in 2 days later and said, I found a place. My iron lung's moving in tomorrow, and so am I. And that place was the infirmary on campus. Well, as time went on, Ed made lots of friends on campus too. They thought he was a pretty cool character. He was. And so he decided a little bit later in the year that he might like to get off campus and go to the local bar with all the rest of the guys. It's like guys do in college the first couple of years. So, well, guess what? There are no curb ramps around Berkeley, or there weren't back in the 60s. So recruited a few of his pals from the football team, and he provided them with a bag of quickcrete and some great big old sledgehammers. That curb ramp's still there today, and it's got a placard on it attributed to Ed. After they finished getting that curb ramp down, they went down to the bar. Ed bought them all a drink. And that same man that got himself into college, stories started spreading across the country that he had managed to get into Berkeley. Well, before long, there were 2 or 3 other young men moving into the infirmary slash now it's a dormitory for kids with disabilities. And they got quite a reputation as the Rolling Quads. Um, but they worked together and they learned together. And what one of them couldn't do for themselves, one of the other ones might be able to help them with. So peer counseling was how they made things work. They talked to each other. They hammered out answers by just brainstorming and working together. And that's where the movement really grew from. They were all there, they were all studying different things, they all wanted to be their own independent individuals, but they knew they needed to work together to make it happen. In 1972, in Berkeley, Ed Roberts established the first Center for Independent Living. It was a groundbreaking role model for the rest of the country. And a few years later, that VR department that said Ed would never have another job or be able to do anything, he was their boss. He was running the VR system in California.
All righty. And so, that brings us to the beginning of the movement, which we now call the independent living movement. But there were a lot of other key points after the founding of the first Center for Independent Living that should be noted. In 1975, which was a great year because it was the year I was born, of course, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed. And this law was important because it guaranteed students with disabilities the right to a free public education that was appropriate to their needs. It was tailored to them. It wasn't a one size fit all education. And that's a law that continues to guide and really give advocates in our individualized education plan meetings the teeth they need to ensure that students get the best education possible alongside their non-disabled students. The next big milestone that hopefully you all already know about is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was passed in the Rose Garden of the White House on July 26, 1990. It was signed into law by President George Bush. And this sweeping piece of civil rights legislation guarantees that people with disabilities are protected in the areas of employment, public accommodations for both private and governmental entities. And it also protects them from retaliation. If they file a complaint, they can't be retaliated against. The next one guarantees that individuals have the right to choose where they want to live and receive services. And that's thanks to the Olmstead decision, which was passed by the U.S. Supreme Court in June of 1999. So it is 25 years old this year. And because of this law, it enabled people with disabilities who were formerly trapped in nursing homes and other institutions the ability to make a choice of whether they wanted to stay there. And I guarantee you a lot of them didn't. or the ability to live where they wanted to within the community. And that's a piece of legislation in Tennessee that was, although the decision was passed in 1999, we did not have any services here in Tennessee until 2008, and that's where we founded the Choices program, which is used today by thousands of Tennesseans to stay out of nursing homes and institutional settings. Our next one is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. WIOA is a lot easier to say. It was passed in 2014, and it guaranteed that people had meaningful access to integrated employment opportunities that paid fair wages. It also emphasized that more youth services related to transitioning out of school were also put into place. And then finally, our favorite here, the Administration on Community Living. It was started in 2012, and it gave Centers for Independent Living a home within the federal government. That was the first time we really, as a majority of, which we always say we're a minority of people, had a place in the U.S. government. Up to that point, we were under the Department of Education or wherever our funding came down. But now we have the Administration on Community Living, and so those are some of the really big milestones that should be celebrated. It took a lot of advocating by people in the movement that believed in our philosophy to get us where we are today. Um, and it'll take a lot of us to continue to get us to where we want to go in the future. And so part of what we wanted to do was to tell our stories so that you have a good understanding of, you know, why independent living, the philosophy and the movement is so important. So I'll start with me and then I'll turn it back over to Sandy. So I was born, as I said, in 1975. So I was about 15 years old when the ADA was signed into law. So up to that point, I had had a pretty good education. I went to a regular school, and I was in regular classes with my peers who didn't have disabilities, and I was pulled out upon occasion to do different things like improving my braille skills or learning how to use a computer, learn how to walk with a white cane. But other than those maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, I was in with everybody else, learning my ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. I had, teachers who told me, "When you get to college, there's not gonna be somebody like me to help you talk to your teacher, so you're gonna have to learn how to talk to them yourselves." And as a typical teenager, I was like, what does she know? Not gonna happen. So I luckily was able to graduate from high school, go into college, and navigating those systems was quite challenging because I had not exactly learned how to talk up for myself. I didn't know what my rights were, that there were such things as the IDEA or ADA. So it was quite a challenging. And in after graduating and coming to work here at the Center for Independent Living, I really did get a whole new perspective on people with disabilities that didn't look like me, that had other disabilities, whether it was a physical disability or hearing or intellectual disability or a combination of multiple disabilities. I'd never been widely exposed to that, and learning how to use my community supports and how to talk up for myself, and knowing that no matter who I turned to, I had value, and that you were accepted for who you were. And I think that's the role that Centers for Independent Living play. And it also told me that any decision about me, as we always say, nothing about me without me. And I think that is something that I'll never forget. So, Sandy, what about you?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I've unknowingly been a part of the movement a lot longer than most of the guys watching this video or the people that I work with because I acquired my disability at 4 years old. And I'm a little older than that now. In fact, I'm retiring in a few weeks. So I'm an old lady. I have children and grandchildren, and I even have a great grandchild. So, but once upon a time, doctors told my parents that couldn't happen, that I would never grow past puberty, and that I would always need somebody to look after me. Well, guess what?
You did fine all by your
I did. Uh, I unfortunately or fortunately ran away and got married at 19 years old. And although the marriage didn't stick, or it stuck for 9 years, and a lot of damage can be done to an individual in 9 years. So, but I acquired two wonderful little kids out of it. That when I got back to Memphis in 1984, I had to take care of them. And by being told that I was only good for staying at home and taking care of the house and the kids for 10 years, and how much of a background in educational stuff. I'd graduated from high school in the top 40%, and I loved to read, so I'd done a lot of reading. My mother was a vocational secretary, and she was a bright lady, and my daddy had run a small business, but I'd always liked it. My parents said, "You gotta be typical. You can't stand out. You can't be one of those people." Well, I was having problems living with that. And in about 1985, I met the first person I'd ever met with a disability. She was another single mom who used a manual wheelchair uh, due to paraplegia. And she played basketball and worked a full time job and was a single mom too. So she and I had met through work, and then we lived in the same apartment building for a while. And when I lost my job and I didn't quite know what to do, she brought me to Access All Areas, the Memphis Center for Independent Living, which it was called in 1985. Today we are Disability Connection Mid South, Memphis's Center for Independent Living. But I met a peer counselor on that staff named Deborah Cunningham. Now, Deborah had contracted polio, just like Ed had had as a small child. She was one of the most amazing women I'd ever met. But I admit that I was a little intimidated and actually scared to death of this woman because she may have been in a wheelchair and had movable arm braces, and but she looked at me with those eyes that knew everything, everything. And she looked at me and she told me, "Your disability is nothing to hide or be ashamed of. Look at everything you've accomplished in your life. You've you're doing for yourself, your kids, for others. Sit, stand, or roll, but take your power back." Took a little time and encouragement, but little by little, I found my path and my home here at the Center for Independent Living. Here, just as Christina said, we're always accepted and honored as the people we are. Doesn't matter whether we use a chair or a white cane or hearing aids or sign language or anything else. We're just people like you, people like your friends, but with that awareness that we can be what we want to be and that we have power and that we have rights. Now, I'm not saying I haven't fallen down the rabbit hole a few times, And as Deborah's assistant and secretary, there were a few detours I had to take to get back here. And I'd fall off the wagon on self-reliance and self-worth, but I'd meet Deborah up for dinner or come back in for a support group or something, and she'd give me one of those verbal smacks upside the head, and I can still hear her in my ear whispering, "It's okay. It's okay to sit down and rest, but it's never okay not to get back up." And so, whatever I do, I remember my mentors and, yes, my heroes. And to the best of my ability, I will do what Justin Dark told us all and lead on.
So we challenge each of you today to help us continue with the IL philosophy and the movement that started with Ed Roberts and was influenced by many movements, including the civil rights movement, the self-help movement, consumerism, and deinstitutionalization. It takes stories like not only mine, but Sandy's as well. We want you to think of your story, whether you are a person with a disability or you have a family member with a disability, and write those stories down and share them, and always know and always tell them, like Sandy said, it's okay to rest. It's okay to sit a while, but you have to keep on moving. You have to keep on striving. And always, when there are decisions, that they should be nothing about us without us. That's it. We're done.